Hi, and thank you so much for joining us either live, as a couple of you are, or in the video after the fact for the Bath Digital Festival having gone digital. We're running a sort of careers advice question and answer session. I'm Jessica Rose, and I've been running sort of one-to-one career advice calls with folks in tech or wanting to get into tech, for the past maybe 5 or 6 years now. And I love an excuse to talk to folks who are interested in moving into technology roles or digital roles, or folks who sort of have questions about what to do once they're in those roles. And I'm here today with.
Oh, Becky, hello. So some of you might have already seen my face before popping up now and again. I'm the organizer of the Bath Digital Festival. And I'm here to support Jess with the questions. So if you have anything, please do pop them into the Q&A, which you have at the bottom of your page, and I will filter those out and ask away. So
Yeah.
anything you want to know, please do type them in.
And I think we've got some pre-submitted question that folks were kind enough to pass along before
We
the
do.
session started.
Yes, we do. We do. So I guess, do we want to just fire away with that? Get started straight away with those
Yeah.
questions?
If
Yeah.
anything comes in from folks attending live, we can jump on those as they come up.
Brilliant. Okay. All right. Well, the first question. I like the idea of a career as developer, but I don't even know where to start. Do you have any tips? It's quite a big
Yeah,
one.
I love this as well because I like the idea of being a developer is a great first step. When a lot of people chat to developers and say, "Oh, I'd love to be a developer," a lot of times you'll get a ton of questions, and none of them are super helpful. Be like, "Do you want to be a web developer or a backend developer?" Or and I'll be like, "No, I don't have enough information about that yet. I've just found out about development. Let's take it back a notch."
Mm.
And I think part of that question is important. So thinking about what kinds of things you'd like to be building. So, oh, I'd really like to be building things I can see. I like the visual aspect of designing and developing. I perhaps want to be doing stuff on the web because I spend a lot of time on the web myself. I chat to a lot of younger folks who are like, "Oh, do you know what I want? Is I like games." And I'm like, "Okay, games." Um, but the first place I'd send you is to have a think and say, "Okay, what do I want to make?" And if what you want to make is just more money, that's still a completely reasonable answer. I love to encourage folks to take a couple of little tiny steps with coding. So go over to a free tutorial like Free Code Camp, or go over to do some of the sample things on Code Academy and just see if you like how that feels. And if you do, it's time to say, okay, it's a time to look at retraining. And that could be, I'm going to look at some of the free tutorial environments online and get really, really involved with those. I've hired multiple developers who are web developers who just used Free Code Camp. And that's what they did on their own with no money. Um, it's really tempting to say, oh, I'm going to go to a boot camp. And boot camps are designed to be tempting like that, but they can be they're, aside from one up in Scotland, none of them have government accreditation. So they're all sort of like private schools of various quality. And I'm always really cautious. So there are some that are free. There's a free boot camp up here in Birmingham. There's a free one down in London. But the more expensive ones can cost 8 or 10 or 12,000 pounds for a 3-month course.
Yeah.
And with those being sort of variously not fantastic sometimes, I'm always really hesitant about encouraging folks to go for a paid one. Yeah, if you want to go for a paid boot camp, do your research first.
Yeah, I can imagine. And that was one of the questions actually that came up is that, um, where could you go to start learning to code for a free or minimal cost, just to see if that's something that you like to do. And I know you've just mentioned a couple of examples there. Are there any other
Yeah.
areas that you would suggest as a good place to start?
So for web developers, I want to send them to Free Code Camp. I want to send them to sort of online communities around that.
Mm.
And I think what gets really challenging is that there's a lot of stuff on the introductory level. So a lot of folks feel that it's not satisfying, that they're sort of jumping around a little bit.
Yeah.
So, and that's super normal. So say I'm going to spend some time on Code Academy and switch to Free Code Camp and switch to JavaScript the hard way. So there's tons and tons of free and low cost resources. I'd really recommend just seeing what works for you. Some people do like the integrated tutorial environments like FreeCodeCamp has. Some folks really like the sort of traditional, oh gosh, you know I've got one on my desk, don't you? Some folks like the very traditional approach of going for a proper textbook, and I quite like this one.
Yes.
Although I imagine this is maybe a tenor used. So really just going ahead and getting into communities where you've got the opportunity to talk to other learners is so powerful as well. You see me like pushing FreeCodeCamp again and again. It is a really, really good learning environment. So they teach you all the stuff you need to make web pages. So HTML and CSS and JavaScript. But I recommend them so strongly because they've got a really, really strong community where they've got sort of chat channels where you can jump in and chat to other people, and they're just warm and friendly.
So do you, so you mentioned obviously you've got web development and back-end development. Do you think there's certain types of skill sets that apply to those different areas of coding? And just like a certain personality type of area that you think draws a person to in a particular direction?
So this is going to be gently controversial. I don't actually think there is.
Okay.
I think that oftentimes you'll see folks rooted into one or the other. Say, oh, wow, you're more interested in art, you're more visual, we're going to push you to front end stuff.
Yeah.
Or like, oh, wow, you're like, you really, actually, I'm going to posit that with, if you're interested in functional programming, you may want more of a basis in mathematics than you would for other things. Having said that, I think I'll say the misnomer. There's the misconception that you need to be fantastic with math or maths, if we're here in the UK, to be a developer. And I can personally promise you that you really don't. There's a bunch of built-in libraries that do the maths for you a lot of the time. But often it's just not going to be a huge part of it. And having a mathematical knowledge foundation can really help. But I cannot tell you how many times I bombed out of math class. It's, completely fine. I promise you can make your career and nobody's going to come and chase you out of the industry.
Well, that's good to know. That is good. So, obviously, you've mentioned about JavaScript and HTML. Is there a particular coding language that you think is more commonly used and almost kind of the recommended first step to go towards? Yeah. Or
so you would be you probably wouldn't be shocked since you got this question as well, but I get this question all the time from folks looking to get into tech, which is, I want to start learning to program, or I want to start learning technical skills. Which one's the best one for me? And it's difficult because not just me, but anybody giving you advice is never telling you what's best for you. They're just saying what they like to think they would do if they were in your situation. And for programming language, that's even harder because if you ask different people, they're just going to tell you their favorite programming language. My sort of blanket advice is to learn the programming language or learn the technologies that you have the most resources for. So if your sister-in-law is a Java developer, fantastic. If she's patient and lovely and you've got access to her for questions, go ahead and start learning some Java. If you, maybe not in 2020, but like if there's an online meetup that's really useful, that's Python based and you're interested, go ahead and learn Python. So whatever you've got the most resources for. And in employment terms, I hate the idea of people as resources. But here we're really talking about where do you have the most help and where do you have the most support? For me, I often steer new folks to web technologies, and that's just my own bias. Say, hey, I've worked with the web for a long time. Of course, you care about what I care about. But some communities that are especially sort of friendly for newbies are especially welcoming. Is Python has got a really good reputation for it. Ruby's got a pretty good reputation for it. And Django, a Python framework, is really friendly and lovely. I would say that you're not going to be trapped. You don't have to stick with the programming language you start with. And you don't have to stick with just one. That's not me terrifying you and telling you need to learn 10 programming languages, but go ahead and sort of get a little bit of experience, do a little bit of work with one, see if you like it, see if you have enough resources. And if you don't, you can shop around a bit.
Okay, so there's not a kind of a one size fits all. It's just start with whatever tickles your fancy.
Yeah, nobody's going to put you in JavaScript jail just because you did a JavaScript tutorial.
Fair enough. That makes sense. And you mentioned quite a few free courses, but if you kind of went through that exploratory phase and you found that you're actually really enjoying it and you want to take it a further step, and perhaps it is time to pay to get a qualification in that area, or maybe that's a question in itself actually. Do you need to have those qualifications to be able to build a career, or go on paid for courses, or can it be something? Well, two questions. One, is that the case? Do you need to pay for courses and get those qualifications? And two, if you do, what would you recommend? Where would you go?
So the challenge here is that, again, there's not a one size fits all answer. So it is absolutely possible to build a career in technology, to build a career with programming, especially when you don't have a formal qualification around that. Having said that, it can be much more challenging, especially for folks who are underrepresented in tech, and especially from folks from marginalized backgrounds, to say, hey, you don't need a degree, even though it'll be significantly more challenging for you without one. If you're looking at, okay, I right now I'm at the stage where I just want to learn, I just want to be able to get these skills in, then I would say don't worry about paying for anything yet. There's courses on major MOOC platforms like edX or Coursera or FutureLearn, but I don't see a lot of employers like, oh wow, you've got a certificate from a MOOC. Like they're lovely for learning, but I wouldn't pay the extra. It's 50 to 100 quid most of the time. Yeah. And courses on Udemy can be of variable quality. Some of them are fantastic and folks swear by them. And if that's what works for you, wait till their sales day and get them for 8 quid. But if we're looking at sort of formal qualifications, do I need a degree? We're all based in the UK right now. They can be quite expensive, but there are a number of universities that run conversion courses. Okay. So if you don't have if you've got a first degree in something else and you want to be doing computer science, there are 1-year computer science conversion courses, which I believe cost, and I'm going to make a little sound in my heart because it's quite expensive, £8,000 to £12,000. Yikes.
That's the problem. I think, nobody really has that in their back pocket, do they? And I think you need to be sure that that's an investment that you want to make.
I often like to encourage people to wait until the market tells them this. So oftentimes in job descriptions, it'll say computer science degree or equivalent. And it sounds very strange to say just ignore that, but just ignore that. People are terrible at hiring. People are terrible at writing job descriptions. If you are getting feedback that they really need this computer science degree, I still think they're terrible at hiring and I don't know what they're talking about. But B, that might be a sign that doing something like a conversion course might make more sense to you.
Okay, brilliant. It's a really good response.
It's like, don't send anybody money. It's 2020, stuff's weird. Save your cash.
I think there's a value to be had, isn't there, for the online courses? And if you can afford to do it and that's the way you want to go, that's absolutely great. But I just think that there needs to be a level of accessibility for others as well. And if there's ways of going about it, then, it's great to know that there's other options out there. So I'm glad.
I think that's one of my biggest sort of... that's the biggest friction I have with some of these paid boot camps. So they're not a formal qualification, but they do tend to be recognized by many employers. But yeah, with costing £8,000 or £10,000 or £12,000, it's not really getting folks in who really need the extra support into the industry. It's sort of getting folks in who could have done a degree, but just wanted to go a bit faster.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know the original question was around paid courses, so this is me cheating, but I do want to highlight again that there are completely free boot camps in the United Kingdom. So there's the School of Code up in Birmingham that's all remote now. There's Founders and Coders down in London. And I'm so sorry that I'm not familiar with any in Bath that are free. yet.
Well, I'm trying to think myself, to be honest, and others might be able to pitch in and
Oh,
say, but
yeah. It occurs to
yeah.
me that I haven't really defined what a boot camp is for folks. It sounds very, very sort of US military, doesn't it? And these are intensive short courses. I've seen them anywhere as short as 8 weeks, which feels a bit short, to 16 or 3 months or even 6 months. I've seen some that are a year, but mostly in Europe and the US. And they're just intensive courses teaching you generally a specific technology. So come in, join us for 3 months or 4 months. We're going to make you a junior JavaScript developer, a junior Ruby developer. And I usually look at these in the context of these are going to teach you the skills you need to try and get that first job.
Okay, great. Well, talking about first jobs then, well, I guess one question, what kind of salary would you expect as a junior developer?
Cool. So that's such a good question. And it's kind of a disappointing question because I think for folks outside the tech industry, we get a lot of messaging, the pay is fantastic. But for junior developers, I've seen folks take salaries as low as £18,000 a year up into sort of the mid-20s. So it's not fantastic your first year or two. What I will say is that, and for folks who've had a career before moving into tech, this is always weird. You can just change jobs after a year, and that's not strange. And that's kind of expected. And folks do often, some folks do. It's mostly a San Francisco and London thing, isn't it? Some folks do change jobs every year, every 2 years, and max out their salary potential that way. I will say that, yeah, making early to mid-20s your first year or two is really common. But within 2 or 3 years, I'd expect that 2 on the front to change to a 3.
Okay.
And for somebody more senior, I'd expect anywhere from pay in the mid 40s
Oh, wow.
up into, I think I'd class silly money as maybe 70 or 80 or 90,000 pounds. This is still outside of London. So I've given you sort of my familiarity with outside of London pricing, where you're going to see fewer jobs on the higher end of that scale. But you're still not paying London rent, so that's fine.
That's true. That's very true. And I guess having a career in this kind of area actually means that there's a bit more flexibility as well. So you might, I guess it also depends on the organization, but it generally gives you that flexibility to be able to work from anywhere.
I think so. And especially if our dear listener is looking for a job right now, oh gosh, I'm so sorry. What a stressful time to be looking for work. But also just ignore the location on any job. So everything's remote now. Just assume everything's remote now. And yeah, see if and when they want to push you back to the office.
That's very true. That's very true. And then hopefully it'll remain flexible working for the foreseeable future.
I mean, nobody wants to pay rent on the office. It'd be a bit silly to push you back in.
Exactly. Do you actually know, and going back onto that current climate situation, would you say that now is still an okay time to be looking for jobs? Are people still recruiting at the moment?
If you don't have to look for work right now, I'd recommend not looking for work right now. If you do have to look for work right now, there are still people getting offers. There's still interviews happening. There's still roles being posted. But it is a significantly more challenging market right now. The big reason I'm recommending people, if you don't have to change jobs right now, don't. In big part is just because everything is so stressful right now. I don't mean to assume your personal life, but one's personal life has probably gotten pretty strained over the past couple of months. Folks aren't really going outside anymore. It's a bit irresponsible, but I genuinely do not know what the current restrictions are here. You can't shake hands with more than 3 people unless there's also a dog. But there's sort of a lot of things you have to keep in mind at the moment. And just not having to add the stress of a job hunt, and especially not adding the stress of a job hunt that's more challenging than usual, is something I'd love to steer people away from if they can stick it out in their current role for a little while.
Yeah, that makes sense. Just to mention, if is anyone who has any questions that they'd like to raise now, we can still take some. So please do pop them in the Q&A. Otherwise, Jessica and I are going to be wittering on. This is a good opportunity for you to ask away. I don't actually have anything else that's been sent in for us. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add
So
to the conversation.
I might talk really briefly about stress reduction in job hunting, because
Yeah.
me saying, hey, don't look for a job if you don't have to, is not very life affirming for folks who do have to look right now.
That's true, yes.
And I've got a couple of really, really robustly practical things I recommend for folks job hunting. And I recommend these all the time, but I recommend them more than usual now. And the first one is just to recognize that job hunting is brutal. So even though it's a professional series of rejections, it's a series of rejections. So really making sure that you're making space for that to, minimize the amount of damage it's doing to your self-esteem is going to be important. I talk to a lot of people, and when I'm job hunting myself, I find that a challenge is that if I'm looking for roles, if I'm looking for new opportunities, every time I sit down in front of my computer, I get this sort of sense of urgency. I should be looking for jobs right now, no matter what time it is. And I really recommend that people time box when they look for new roles, to say, okay, Tuesday and Thursday mornings, I've got a couple hours blocked, and that's where I look for new roles. And then I go ahead and make a list of the ones I'm interested in, and then apply to a couple each day, sort of space out the stressful tasks. Another thing I often hear from job seekers is like, oh, I was on Facebook or Reddit, or I was on social media, and somebody posted my dream job, and they said, hurry and apply today. But they posted it tomorrow, or they posted it yesterday, and the job is closed. And that can feel really devastating, missing out on an opportunity that feels perfect. One thing I do, and I recommend other folks do, is I keep a spreadsheet, like a Google Sheets, of all of my dream jobs, every place I'd love to work. So it's just that, and then a link directly to their job site, like directly to where their openings are. And that way, even if you're not actively looking for work right now, you could say, okay, Wednesday morning before I start work, I can open up the spreadsheet, and you can actually use a browser plugin to automatically load all of the URLs off that sheet. And at least for me, it's part of my sort of Wednesday morning coffee. So it's like, oh, okay, this is built into my day. And even though these are dream jobs, even though these are companies I'd love to work, I recognize that they don't often hire. So I'm going to go ahead and look at the EFF job board, but I'm going to be pretty chill if there's nothing right now.
Mm-hmm. That's a really lovely tip. I like that idea a lot.
Yeah.
So we have got a question. So Sam has asked, what would you say would be the best way to get into virtual reality or augmented reality jobs? Which is a great question.
Fantastic. Yeah. And it's going to be a very boring answer. So I'm going to send you to, sorry, Sam. I'm going to send you to do some homework. So go ahead and get a blank document up. And I'm going to ask you to go around and search for mixed reality, augmented reality development jobs, and start saving the text from those. So usually they'll have bullet points with the skills they want. And I'd recommend digging into those skills. So if you're looking for something that's like web VR, they probably want you to be doing more and more JavaScript. If there's something where they want you to be doing work with oh gosh, I don't even know. So I'd go ahead and I'd look into the skills that are available, but I'd also go ahead and take a look at what companies you're interested in. And this sounds very creepy. It sounds like you're making a dossier, but you're making a non-creepy dossier. And say, okay, well, I see that locally, or I see here in the UK that there's 15 or 20 or 25 companies that are posting all of these jobs in VR and AR that I'm interested in. I'm going to go ahead and start gently networking with some of these folks, or I'm going to build my own job spreadsheet and check in on them every Monday morning to see which of these are hiring. So it's really about starting to look at who's hiring for these jobs and whether or not you can network with them and keep an eye on their jobs, but also what kind of skills they're looking for. I'm brutally sorry not to have like the magic bullet, like, oh, VR, you just need to. Unfortunately, I think it's going to be, you just need to do a blob of research about what kinds of specific skills they're looking for.
But that's a really nice way, like you say, of also then finding out who is recruiting potentially in those areas, what businesses even exist in your local area. So it's a really nice tip. I like that. And that's great. It can be applied for any role, right?
Asking for a informational interview is also not, a completely fine, not weird thing to do. And say, hey, do you know what? And I always say, especially if you're aspiring, always talk about your future job title as your job title now. So it's like, oh, hey, I'm a developer focused on augmented reality, and I'm really interested in your specific job title. Would you have a couple minutes to answer some of my questions, either via email or possibly a short call? And a lot of people will say no or not answer, but a couple people will come back and say, yeah, I'd love to have this informal sort of informational call with you.
That's really nice. And actually, just to do a small plug, but I think an appropriate plug is that's part of the Digital Skills Exchange that we'll be running next year, actually, is to be able to connect individuals with the employees and the actual people doing the job, so you can do exactly that. Talk to the people in doing the roles that you're interested in and ask them those questions, find out how they progressed, how they got to where they were, and see if that, that works for you. So yeah, there's opportunities out there.
Oh, fantastic. I can't wait for that to go live.
Yeah. So we have another question as well. Do you think it's important for junior developers to be studying and doing extracurricular projects outside of work hours in order to progress?
So you're going to get my personal opinion, which is very likely not your manager's opinion. And I'm going to give you a very robust no. So yes, you could work on tons of open source stuff. You could work on tons of side projects. But again, especially right now, everything's so baroquely stressful. I know fantastic senior developers, and I know fantastic folks who've been in the industry for, I'm very old, who've been in the industry a while, who don't have side projects, who don't study extensively outside of work. And especially for junior developers, I love to encourage like work-life balance while it's new. So yes, there's a ton of things you could study. There's a ton of extra stuff you could work on. But especially in 2020 and the way things are going 2021, I think that getting some really, really structured downtime, resting, relaxing, unplugging after work might be significantly more important than doing this additional study. A lot of folks will ask for it in the interview stage or ask for it on your CV. So I do want to go ahead and flag that I don't think it's the only way. I don't think it's the way I recommend for folks, but my view is not the view that everyone shares across the industry. I want you to take naps and play video games, but somebody else might want to see like, I only work on side projects and this is all I do with my time. Though I might politely suggest that's a red flag at a job.
I guess it depends, right? If it's projects that you want to work on because you have an interest and it's a hobby and you want to do that kind of thing, but don't specifically think that you have to do it in order to be able to progress your career, because you should be able to do that there should be those opportunities within the job you're doing as well. Yeah. Fab. Well, I think that's the questions that have come in now, and I don't have anything that's come off of my head to ask you either. We've covered quite a lot this afternoon. Is there anything that you would like to add?
No, just that thank you so much for letting me come in and lovingly fuss at folks to take more breaks.
Oh, brilliant. Well, thank you all for coming. This has been a really lovely session. I like that we've managed to do it in a nice condensed 30 minutes. And I think this will be a really lovely tool for people to be able to watch back again and view at any time. And I think then if there's any other questions that you think of, then please do get in touch with us at the festival and we can always pass them on. I'm sure Jessica wouldn't mind the
it's not question. That hard to get me. I'm always home.
Exactly. Brilliant. Well, thank you.
Cool. Thank you so much again for your time. I'll let you go. And thank you all so much for joining us.
Take care. Bye.